La. In laser, in the old laser, there are 5 alphabets. They are L, A, S, E, R. And the meaning of L is light. The meaning of A is amplification. The meaning of S is stimulated. And the meaning of E is emission. And the meaning of R is radiation. Radiation. That means what is the meaning of laser? The meaning of laser is light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. That is the meaning of laser. And what is laser? Laser is a device. Laser is a device by which laser light can be produced. By which laser light can be produced. And it is one of the most important or outstanding invention of 20th century. यो 20औं शताब्दीमा सबभन्दा बढी आउटस्ट्यान्डिङ इन्भेन्सन भनेको यो लेजर हो। अब यसको धेरै एप्लिकेसन छ है त। एन्ड इट डिफर्स द लेजर लाइट डिफर्स भास्टली फ्रम द ट्रेडिसनल सोर्स अफ लाइट। जसरी लेजरले जसरी लाइट आउँछ नि, लेजर लाइट जस्तो छ त्यसको चाहिँ क्यारेक्टरिस्टिक्स जुन हामीले प्रयोग गर्ने अर्डिनरी लाइटको क्यारेक्टरिस्टिक्स भन्दा धेरै मानेमा फरक छ। कुरा बुझ्यौ? सो लेजर डिफर्स भास्टली फ्रम द traditional source of light. And the first theoretical basis for the development of laser was first given by scientist Einstein in 1916, and he predicted the possibility of stimulated emission. You know about stimulated emission. When Einstein gave the possibility or give the idea about the possibility of stimulated emission, then laser light is produced or laser is produced. Now, the first laser was first built by T.H. Mayman. This is the scientist. He made first laser device in 1960. In 1960, T.H. Mayman built the first laser, and the characteristics of laser light which differs the laser light from the traditional source of light are as follows. And the characteristics are, the first characteristics of laser light is unidirectional. Unidirectional. That means laser light always move in same direction. Unidirectional. Another is coherence. Coherence means all the photons move in same phase. That is coherence. And another is monochromatic. The ordinary light has different colors. That is from violet to red. So it has widely spread wavelength, ranging from 4000 angstrom to approximately 7500 angstrom. But so ordinary light is not monochromatic, but laser light has very narrow difference in wavelength, and that is less than 10 angstrom. Less than 10 angstrom. So you can say laser light is approximately monochromatic. It is not exactly monochromatic, but you can say it is approximately monochromatic. And another is highly intense, because the laser light is unidirectional, and it always moves in the form of bundles in parallel direction. So you can say such light is highly intense. And another is less divergent, or the laser light is less divergent than ordinary light. These are 5 important characteristics of laser light which differs laser light to the traditional light. अब तिमीलाई एक्जाममा धेरैचोटि सोधेको छ, what do you mean by laser, and discuss about its characteristics, or how laser light differs from ordinary light. भन्न तिमीलाई एक्जाममा पटक पटक सोधेको क्वेशन छ भने यी 5 वटा कुरामा फोकस भएर तिमीले लेख्नुपर्छ है त। के रहेछ भन्दाखेरि लेस डाइभर्जेन्ट, हाइली इन्टेन्स, मोनोक्रोमेटिक, unidirectional, and coherence. So these are some characteristics, or these are some properties of laser light. So what is unidirectional property of laser? You know, the ordinary sources of light emit light in all directions. If you have ordinary source of light, then it emits light in all directions. But laser But in laser, the beam of light travels in one direction. The beam of light travels in one direction. That means the light which is emitted from the laser travels in one direction. So you can say that the laser light is highly unidirectional than ordinary light. This is one difference between ordinary light and laser light. And another is coherence. Another property is coherence. Another characteristics is coherence characteristics. And in case of ordinary light, the light rays are out of phase. They are out of phase. So they are called incoherent. But in case of laser, the light waves are emitted from the identical photons. From the identical photons by stimulated emission of radiation. The light rays are emitted from the identical photons, and the process is stimulated emission of radiation. And so the photons are in phase, or which are in phase to each other. So we can say that the laser light is coherence light, but ordinary light is not coherence. That is another difference between ordinary light and laser light. And third one is monochromatic. The meaning of monochromatic. Mono means single, chromatic means color. You can say laser light is approximately monochromatic, but ordinary light is not monochromatic, because the ordinary light has widely spread wavelength. The ordinary light has 7 colors, violet to red. Violet color has minimum wavelength, that is 4000 angstrom, but red color has maximum wavelength, approximately 7500 angstrom. That means the ordinary light has different colors, and that has widely spread wavelength, that is from 4000 angstrom to 4000 angstrom to 7500 angstrom. So you can say ordinary light is not monochromatic, but laser can produce light having very narrow range of wavelength, which is less than 10 angstrom. जम्मा हेर त उसमा लगभग 4000 एंगस्ट्रम को वेवलेंथ को रेंज पर्यो भने यो लेजरबाट प्रोड्युस हुने जुन लाइट छ त्यसको जम्मा लेस देन 10 एंगस्ट्रम डिफरेन्स हुन्छ वेवलेंथ भनेपछि एक्ज्याक्टली मोनोक्रोमेटिक नभए पनि के भयो एप्रोक्सिमेटली यु क्यान से laser is monochromatic. Laser light is monochromatic. That is also the major characteristics of laser, and which differs monochromaticity differs laser light to the ordinary light. That is the another difference. And highly intense. That means the intensity of ordinary light decreases rapidly with the increase in distance. जब ordinary source of light छ नि जब इन डिस्टेन्स बढ्छ नि डिस्टेन्स बढेपछि त्यसको चाहिँ इन्टेन्सिटी एकदमै घट्या हुन्छ सोर्स को नजिकै इन्टेन्सिटी हाई हुन्छ जति हामी टाढा जान्छौं अलि टाढा जान्छौं तब के हुन्छ भन्दा त्यसको इन्टेन्सिटी ड्रास्टिकली डिक्रिज हुन्छ हैन The intensity of ordinary light decreases rapidly with distance as it spreads out in space, but laser emits light in the form of fine bundle parallel beam in one direction, in particular direction. So intensity of laser light is high. So you can say laser light is highly intense light than ordinary light. This is also the difference between ordinary light and laser light. And another is less divergent. Light from the ordinary source spreads in the form of spherical wavefront. Light from the ordinary source spreads out in the form of spherical wavefront, and hence it is highly divergent. But laser light propagates in the form of plane wavefront. So you can say it is less divergent. So you can say the another difference between ordinary light and laser light is the laser light is less divergent, but the ordinary light is highly divergent. These are some differences between ordinary light and laser light. अब तिमीलाई एक्जाममा सोध्यो दुई किसिमले क्वेशन सोध्न सक्छ के भन्दाखेरि पहिलो क्वेशन सुन व्हाट इज लेजर राइट डाउन इट्स क्यारेक्टरिस्टिक्स भन्यो भने यो 5वटै क्यारेक्टरिस्टिक्स लेख र यिनीहरूको थोरै 2-3 लाइन ल्याङ्ग्वेज लेख्ने बुझ्यो। अनि व्हाट इज लेजर लाइट, हाउ लेजर डिफर्स फ्रम अर्डिनरी लाइट, हाउ लेजर लाइट डिफर्स फ्रम अर्डिनरी लाइट भन्यो भने नि 5वटै लेखेर यिनीहरूको टक्क डिफरेन्स यहाँ मैले हरेकको डिफरेन्स तरिका लेखिदिएको छु बुझ्यो। र यसरी लेख्नु पर्यो। 2टा क्वेसन 2 तरिकाले क्वेसन यो आउन सक्ने भयो। एकदम इम्पोर्टेन्ट क्वेसन छ है त। यो तिमीले पहिला यसरी पढिरहेको थिएन होला। नाउ व्हाट इज इमिसन अफ रेडिएसन, यु नो इन केस अफ लेजर you have stimulated emission of radiation. So to know about the principle of laser, the principle of laser is the stimulated emission of radiation. So before studying about the principle of laser, you should know about what is emission of radiation. You should know about emission of radiation. When an atom in the ground state is excited, suppose initially the atom is in ground state E1 and this is the excited state E2. Let us see on the screen. E1 is the ground state and E2 is the excited state. And initially, let us suppose that the atoms are in ground state. Initially, the atoms are in ground state. And if the atoms in the ground state are excited, then what happens? They gain energy. Excite hunu bhaneko ke ho? Energy gain hunu. Okay. जब तिनीहरूले energy gain गर्छन्, when they excite, that means when they gain energy, then they jump to the excited state. And they do not stay in the excited state much time. So they returns back to the ground state. And while returning towards the ground state, they emit photon. They emit photon. And the energy of emitted photon is given by Bohr's theory, and which is given by E2 minus E1 equal to h nu. E2 minus E1 equal to h nu. That is the energy of emitted photon. When an atom jumps from higher state, that means excited state, to the lower state, that means ground state, then there is emission of radiation. There is a photon is emitted there. That means the process is called emission of radiation. And the frequency of emitted photon is given by nu equal to E2 minus E1 by h, because the difference in energy between two levels is given by h nu from Bohr's postulate, from Bohr's third postulate, which you have already studied in chemistry as well as in physics while studying about modern physics. That means nu equal to E2 minus E1 by h. And such phenomenon is called emission of radiation. Such phenomenon is called emission of radiation. And there are two types of emission of radiation. There are two types of emission of radiation. They are spontaneous emission of radiation and stimulated emission of radiation. There are two types of emission of radiation. They are stimulated emission of radiation and another is spontaneous emission of radiation. And in case of laser, or the principle of laser is stimulated emission of radiation. Now, what is spontaneous emission of radiation? What is stimulated emission of radiation, and what are the differences between them? That is also the major question that is asked in exam. What are the differences between spontaneous and stimulated emission of radiation? Very important question. Now, what is spontaneous emission of radiation? The spontaneous emission, suppose initially, suppose the atom is in excited state. Let us see in the screen. The atom is in excited state and the atoms in the excited state falls to the ground state spontaneously. There are two ways by which the atoms drops back to the ground state from the excited state. So now here, यो एटम मानव एक्साइटेड स्टेटमा छ, यो एक्साइटेड स्टेटमा भएको एटम छ नि हो, यसलाई ग्राउन्ड स्टेटमा झारेपछि फोटोन निस्कने कुरा बुझ्यो। र यो झर्ने दुईवटा तरिका छन्, एउटा भनेको स्पोन्टेनियस इमिसन, अर्को स्टिमुलेटेड इमिसन। जस्तै तिमी क्लासमा बसेका छ नि, तिमी क्लासरुममा बसेका छ, मेरो क्लासमा बसेका छ, अर्थात् कसैको क्लासमा बसेका छ, तिमी क्लासबाट दुई तरिकाले बाहिर निस्कन सक्छौ। कसरी भन्दा, एउटा तिमी पढ्न बोरिङ लाग्यो, क्लास एटेन्ड गर्नै मन लागेन, अर्थात् चाहिँ टेन्सन भयो, भने तिमी स्पोन्टेनियसली आफ्नो खुसीले त्यहाँबाट निस्केर कोठाभन्दा बाहिर जान सक्छौ। You can go out from the classroom according to your interest, and that is called spontaneous emission of radiation. हैन, तिमी त्यहाँबाट चाहिँ आफ्नै सुरले बाहिरतिर निस्क्यौ, निस्केपछि तिमी कहाँ जाने भन्ने कुरै तिमीलाई थाहा छैन, तिमी मन लाग्दो डिरेक्सनमा जान्छौ, जता पनि हिँड्न सक्छौ, हो कि हैन? भने तिमी जता चाहन्छौ त्यतै जान सक्छौ। भने त्यस्तोलाई स्पोन्टेनियस भनेको आफै, यदि एक्साइटेड स्टेटमा भएको एटम आफै ग्राउन्ड स्टेटमा झर्यो, कसैको करकाप बिना झर्यो, हो कि हैन? भने त्यो झर्ने बेलामा उसले जुन इमिट गर्छ फोटोन, त्यो प्रोसेस भनेको स्पोन्टेनियस इमिसन अफ रेडिएसन। नाउ when an atom in excited state E2 drops back to the ground state E1 spontaneously by emitting a photon of energy h nu, then the process is called spontaneous emission of radiation, and the frequency of emitted photon is given by nu equal to E2 minus E1 by h. E2 minus E1 by h, and some characteristics of spontaneous emission are. अब हेर है, यो इम्पोर्टेन्ट क्यारेक्टरिस्टिक्स छन्। मैले 7-8 वटा क्यारेक्टरिस्टिक्स लेखिदिएको छु। अब जब तिमीले क्यारेक्टरिस्टिक्स पढ्छौ तब तिमीले सजिलै डिफरेन्स बताउन सक्छौ है त। नाउ व्हाट आर द क्यारेक्टरिस्टिक्स अफ स्पोन्टेनियस इमिसन? अब यहाँ हेर्ने, यो एक्साइटेड स्टेटमा भएको एटमहरू ग्राउन्ड स्टेटमा झरेका छन्। ल हेर, यहाँबाट एउटा झरेको फोटोन यतातिर हिँड्यो, अर्को फोटोन यतातिर हिँड्यो, अर्को फोटोन यतातिर हिँड्ला, अर्को फोटोन झर्यो यतातिर हिँड्ला, अर्को यतातिर। दे क्यान मुभ इन ऱ्यान्डम डाइरेक्सन, हो कि हैन? तिमी क्लासबाट 48 जना साथीहरू मनलाई एक्लै क्लासबाट निस्क्यो भने कता जान्छौ भन त? 48 वटा डिरेक्सनमा जान्छौ, 48 तिर जान्छौ, एउटै डिरेक्सनमा जाँदैनौ। राम जता गयो श्याम त्यतै जाँदैन, राम एकातिर जान्छ, राम गेटतिर जान्छ, श्याम यता होस्टलतिर आउँछ, हो कि हैन? अर्को हरि चाहिँ यता क्वार्टरतिर आउँछ, हैन? यसरी हिँड्ने भनेपछि अब यहाँबाट निस्केका जुन फोटोनहरू हुन् नि, यिनीहरूको डिरेक्सन एउटै छैन। दे मुभ इन ऱ्यान्डम डिरेक्सन। When the atom in the excited state falls back to the ground state spontaneously, they can move in random direction. That is the major property, major characteristics of spontaneous emission. So if the emitted photon move in random direction, then no laser light is produced. So you can say that spontaneous emission of radiation is not the principle of laser. That is not the principle of laser. So what are the characteristics of spontaneous emission? What is spontaneous emission? Write down its characteristics. The characteristics are, it is a random process and it is also probabilistic process. It is, so you can say it is a random and probabilistic process. This is first characteristics. Second, this process is not easy to control from outside. Spontaneous emission of radiation is not easy to control from outside. And number 3, in this process, the photons are emitted haphazardly. That means they move in random direction. They move in random direction. This is also the major characteristics of spontaneous emission. They move in random direction because the emitted photons or the photons are emitted haphazardly in case of spontaneous emission. And number 4, the photons of slightly different frequencies are generated. All photons have not same frequency. They have slightly different frequencies in case of spontaneous emission of radiation. And another is the emitted photons have no phase relationship to each other. Hence the light thus produced is not coherence. That is, the light produced by spontaneous emission of radiation is incoherent light. If the light is incoherent, then its nature is similar to ordinary light. Its nature is not similar to laser light. So you can say spontaneous emission cannot produce coherent light. So it is not the principle of laser. Now, another is there is no amplification of light due to this process. There is no amplification of light because the emitted photon move in random direction. जब निस्केका फोटोनहरू फरक डिरेक्सनमा हिँड्छन्, मन लाग्दो हिँड्छन् भने के भयो त भन्दा त्यहाँबाट निस्केको जुन लाइट हो त्यो लाइटको इन्टेन्सिटी हाई हुँदैन, फरक फरक डिरेक्सनमा हिँड्छन् सबै निस्केका लाइटहरू एउटै डिरेक्सनमा हिँड्यो भने बल्ल इन्टेन्सिटी हाई हुन्छ कुरो बुझ्यो बुझेन त्यसकारण द लाइट the intensity of light produced by spontaneous emission is not high. So because the emitted photon move in random direction by spontaneous emission of radiation. And now the net intensity generated, the net intensity of light generated is given by this formula IT equal to N times I. The net intensity of light generated is given by IT equal to N times I, where N equal to number of atoms emitting photons, and I is intensity of each photon. I is intensity of each photon, and this gives the total intensity of light generated due to stimulated emission of radiation. Now, another characteristic number 8 is the intensity of light decreases rapidly with the distance from the source. Because the emitted photon moves in random direction. If the emitted photon move in random direction, then the characteristics is similar to the ordinary light. The characteristics is similar to the ordinary light, which means the intensity of light which is emitted by spontaneous emission of radiation decreases rapidly with increase in distance from the source. And another is light produced from the source by spontaneous emission is unpolarized light. That is unpolarized light. These are some characteristics of laser light. And by knowing all the characteristics and comparing these characteristics to the characteristics of laser light, you know about the characteristics of laser light. That means for laser light, you should have unidirectional light, you should have coherence light, you should have less divergent light, you should have highly intense light, you should have monochromatic light. And by spontaneous emission, you cannot obtain light. No light is generated, which have the characteristics similar to the characteristics of laser light. So you can say spontaneous emission of radiation is not the characteristic, is not the principle of laser. That is not principle of laser. अब तिमीलाई exam how can you say that spontaneous emission is not the principle of laser? भन्यो भने तिमीले टक्क characteristicsसँग यसको characteristics compare गर्नु पर्यो. You should compare the characteristics of laser light and spontaneous emission. What type of light is produced by spontaneous emission? This is about spontaneous emission of radiation. Now, what is stimulated emission of radiation? And that stimulated emission of radiation is also called induced emission. That is also called induced emission. यसलाई induced emission पनि भनिन्छ. र अघि भर्खर मैले तिमीलाई भने नि तिमी क्लासरुमबाट दुई तरिकाले निस्कन्छ हो के हैन. एउटा तरिका त मैले भनिसके के भने भन्दाखेरि तिमी क्लासमा सरले पढाएको इन्ट्रेस्ट लागेन, सुन्न मन लागेन, शरीर अनइजी भयो हो के हैन भने आफ्नो स्वविवेकले क्लासमा बस्दिन भनेर तिमी स्पोन्टेनियसली बाहिर निस्कन्छ र त्यसरी निस्क्यौ भने तिमी स्पोन्टेनियस इमिसन अनुसार भयो. ठीक छ. अनि तिमी र्यान्डम डिरेक्सनमा मुभ गर्ने भो. 48 जना निस्क्यो 48 तिर फर्केर हिँड्यो हैन. तर यदि तिमीलाई कसैले फोर्सफुल्ली त्यहाँबाट निकाल्यो, एकजना मान्छे आयो ए फलानु त्यहाँबाट निस्कि यो क्लासबाट निस्कि र मसँग हिँड नत्र तँलाई तेरो चाहिँ खैरियत छैन भने ओके भनेको फोर्सफुल्ली यु आर फोर्स टु मुभ अर यु आर फोर्स टु लिभ योर क्लासरुम. अब तिम्रो क्लासरुम छोड्न बाध्य पार्यो कसैले र उसले जता भन्यो तिम्रो ज्यानको सुरक्षाको लागि पनि जता भन्यो त्यतैतिर लाग्न थाल्यो भने यस्तो खालको इमिसन भनेको स्टिमुलेटेड इमिसन. यु आर स्टिमुलेटेड बाई अनदर पर्सन एन्ड यु आर लिभिङ योर क्लास forcefully and you are moving in particular direction with the direction of applied force. तो लगाएको फोर्स जता छ त्यही डिरेक्सनतिर तिमी मुभ गर्न थाल्छौ हो के हैन भने यस्तो खालको इमिसन अफ रेडिएसनलाई हामी के भन्छौं स्टिमुलेटेड इमिसन अफ रेडिएसन भन्छौं. जब स्टिमुलेटेड इमिसन अफ रेडिएसन हुन्छ नि तब के हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि इमिटेड फोटोनहरु पार्टिकुलर डिरेक्सनमा मुभ गर्छ. The emitted photon now starts to move in particular direction. And so, stimulated emission of radiation is the principle of laser. अब तिमीलाई एक्जाममा what is the principle of laser भन्यो भने ए stimulated emission of radiation लेख्ने हो. कुरा बुझ्दैन? What is laser? Discuss about its principle भन्यो भने ए stimulated emission of radiation को बारेमा पढ्ने हो. अब हेर यहाँ मैले यो स्क्रिनमा देखाउँछु. Suppose there is a atom in excited state. हेर यहाँ there is an atom in excited state. Now the atom in excited state is forced to move in the ground state. अब यहाँ के भयो त भन्दा एउटा photon incident भयो. A photon is incident on the excited state photon and which is forced to fall in the ground state. अब हेर त यो एटम आफै तल खस्यो कि यो फोटोन का कर कापले तल खस्यो? फोटोन को कर कापले तल खस्यो. The atom in excited state is forced to move, forced to fall in the ground state. In the ground state. So such type of emission of radiation, or in this case the atom is forced to fall in the from excited state to the ground state by the incident photon. So such type of emission of radiation is called stimulated emission of radiation. And the photon, this is the incident photon, and here the photon is emitted, and this is incident photon and this is stimulated photon. ओके न, यो इन्सिडेन्ट फोटोन हो. यो इन्सिडेन्ट फोटोनको डिरेक्सन जता हुन्छ नि, यो फोटोनले के भन्छ भन्दाखेरि इन्सिडेन्ट फोटोनको डिरेक्सन जता हुन्छ, यहाँबाट निस्केको फोटोनको डिरेक्सन पनि त्यही नै हुन्छ. देन द इमिटेड फोटोन इज फोर्स्ड टु मुभ इन द सेम डिरेक्सन अफ इन्सिडेन्ट फोटोन. द इमिटेड फोटोन, फेरि सुन राम्रो छ, द इमिटेड फोटोन इज फोर्स्ड टु मुभ इन द सेम डिरेक्सन अफ इन्सिडेन्ट फोटोन. द्याट मिन्स हियर this is one photon, and by falling this atom from excited state to the ground state, another photon is created, and that emitted photon also moved in the same direction of incident photon. अब यहाँ हेर त, एउटा एटमको कारणले गर्दा अर्को एउटा फोटोन चाहिँ निस्क्यो. एउटा फोटोन आएको थियो, अर्को फोटोन निकाल्यो भनेपछि कतिवटा युनिडाइरेक्सनल फोटोन निस्क्यो? दुईटा युनिडाइरेक्सनल फोटोन निस्क्यो. भने यो दुईटाले अरु दुईटा एटमसँग कोलाइड गर्यो भने के हुन्छ? इफ दिस टु फोटोन फर्दर interact with two atoms, then they give two more photons. That means there will be altogether 4 photons. They move in particular in the same direction, and 4 photons again collide with 4 atoms, giving 8 photons. They move in particular direction, and 8 photons again collide with 8 atoms. Then they give 16 photon. They move in same direction. In this way, a chain reaction occurs. A chain reaction occurs so that a highly intense beam of light is produced due to stimulated emission of radiation. So stimulated emission of radiation is the principle of laser. ठीक छ? ल हेर, when an atom in excited state E2 interact with an incident photon of frequency nu and thereby induced to move to the ground state E1 by emitting the photon of energy E2 minus E1 of same frequency nu. Incident photon को frequency जुन थियो, emitted photon को frequency पनि के भयो? त्यही नै भयो. Then the process is called stimulated emission. Now, what are its properties or characteristics? It is not a random process. अब मैले तिमीलाई spontaneous emission मा it is random process भनेको थिएँ नि, तर stimulated emission is not random process. This is one difference. अब तिमीले characteristics पढ्ने बित्तिकै सबै डिफरेन्स तिमीले सजिलै लेख्न सक्छौ है त. It is not a random process. This process is controllable from outside. The stimulating photon imposes its characteristic to the incident photon, to the emitted photon. So they move in particular direction or same direction. The emitted photon travel in the same direction of incident photon. So the light produced by this process is unidirectional. Unidirectionality is the characteristics. It is the major characteristics of laser light. So you can say by stimulated emission, laser light can be produced, because by stimulated emission, unidirectional light is produced. And the light emitted by such process is approximately monochromatic. If the light is approximately monochromatic, then that is also the important characteristics of laser light, isn't it? That is monochromaticity. And highly amplified beam of light is produced because all the emitted photon move in same direction. So a fine beam of light is produced. So that is also highly intense light is produced by stimulated emission of radiation, and the net intensity of light generated is given by the formula IT equal to n square I. In case of spontaneous emission, IT equal to only n times I. But in case of stimulated emission, IT equal to n square I. That is also another difference. And the plane of polarization are identical to all photon. Consequently, the light is polarized. The light produced by spontaneous emission is not polarized, but light produced due to stimulated emission of radiation is polarized. In this way, you can easily distinguish between spontaneous emission and stimulated emission of radiation. This is about the emission of radiation, and when one photon falls on the excited state, then it generates two photons having the same frequency. They move in same direction. When two photons further collide with two atoms, they produce further two photons having the same frequency. That means there will be altogether 4 photons. एउटाले दुईटा निकाल्यो, दुईटाले अरु दुईटा निकाल्दा 4 वटा भयो, 4 वटाले 8 वटा, 8 वटाले 16, 16 ले 32, 32 ले 64, 64 ले 128, 256, 512 हुँदै हुँदै चेन रियाक्सन हुने भयो र यी सबै त्यहाँबाट निस्केका सबै फोटोनको डाइरेक्सन र फ्रिक्वेन्सी के छ एउटै छ। त्यसकारणले गर्दा हामी के भन्छौं भन्दाखेरि stimulated emission of radiation. So we can say that stimulated emission of radiation is the principle of laser. अब तिमीलाई सोध्न सक्छ what is stimulated emission of radiation and how can you say that? How can you say that stimulated emission of radiation is the principle of laser? भनेर आयो भने तिमीले यहाँसम्म लेख्नु पर्यो है त। ल अब टाइम पनि सिद्धियो है त। अब म यहाँ पपुलेसन इन्भर्सन र टाइप्स अफ लेजर छ यो पढेपछि यो लेजरको कन्टेन्ट पनि सिद्धिन्छ है त। त म अर्को क्लासमा सिद्ध्याउँछु। अब तिम्रो अर्को क्लास पनि सुरु हुने बेला भयो है त। ल केही छ सोध्नु पर्ने? हेलो हेलो खोइ त बोल न। ल यो एकदम राम्रोसँग पढ्ने नि। 2-3 वटा क्वेशन पढाएँ मैले। व्हाट इज लेजर? व्हाट इज लेजर? Discuss about its characteristics, how laser light differs from ordinary light, what is emission of radiation, discuss about stimulated and spontaneous emission of radiation, or what are the differences between stimulated and spontaneous emission of radiation, and write down the characteristics of stimulated and spontaneous emission of radiation. 3-4 वटा क्वेशन बन्न सक्ने हो यसबाट है त। ल यो राम्रोसँग पढ्ने र बाँकी अर्को क्लासमा पढाउँला है त। ल प्र्याक्टिस गर्दै जाने। ठीक छ?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
And goodbye. Bye.
Recording रोक दिनु न सर।
ल ल ल